So once again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to this webinar on how to score 760 on the GMAT. My name is Rajat Sedana. I'm one of the co-founders of eGMAT. I'm going to be your main host today. With me, we have Sandeep, who's a senior strategy expert, as well as Harsha, who's a principal GMAT expert. I should call him more as a principal verbal expert at eGMAT. My goal today with this webinar is to make sure that each one of you has a roadmap to your target GMAT score, whether it's a 730 or a 760. At the same time, my goal also is to make sure that we get your questions answered. So let's kind of put in a poll question or a chat pod, and let's get to know what kind of questions do you have. I'm going to move this over here so that we have enough space. So why are you here? What do you expect to get from this webinar? And again, by the end of this webinar, I'm going to ask you, were you able to achieve that objective? So with what objective are you here? And then let's see whether we can help you fulfill that. All right. I see many of you typing. What should be a strategy for preparation? That's what Sharon says. GMAT strategy, good. That's the objective of this webinar. How to grow from a 460 to a 650, good. How to break the verbal plateau or score barrier, okay. To get the perfect preparation. Perfection is a moving target, so we'll get to that as well. Okay, we have those score ranges. That's excellent. How to time your preparation. How to cope up with work. That's an excellent question. Exam strategy for those 3 hours. Okay. They want to hear my perspective on the GMAT and the strategies to ACE. All right. How to start preparing. How to start if you can give a certain amount of time. Is coaching important? Okay, that's a very personal question. It's the same way as I say, is the MBA important? And I think if the answer to that is yes for you, because other folks, I have a ton of friends who've not done their MBA and are doing just as well. So that's something that I'll let you decide. Okay, daily input for a 740 plus. Mock score is 210. How do you improve? How eGMAT courses help? Okay, we'll talk a bit about it. But eGMAT courses, I mean, I'd say the best way is to experience the free trial and then do a study plan. But you definitely get to know our approach to the GMAT in that terms. First 15 questions. How does the test work? Okay, we'll definitely talk about this. Okay, I think that's you have I have a really good set of questions, and a majority of them will make sure that you get good answers to a majority of them, including stuff such as how long should I take, how should I go about preparing, and then how should you manage your preparation along with your work. Okay. How should you go about that last 50 points of improvement? We'll also talk about that as well. Okay. So with that, I'm going to move that chat because we have 170 odd students here in the webinar, and I just want to make sure we get through the webinar in about 2 hours and 15 minutes or so. So those of you who asked about eGMAT courses, as I said, the best way is to experience them, and we have a very comprehensive free trial. Whether you want to learn quant or verbal, whether in verbal you want to learn SCCR or RC, or in quant you want to learn geometry, algebra, and number properties, you have free concepts, a subset of free concepts there. Definitely go through it. They'll expose you to our way of learning things. They'll expose you to the feedback that we provide, and then post that you can write to me at rajat@e-gmat.com if you still have questions. That's something that I'd recommend. With that, we also have some upcoming free webinars. We have a free webinar on geometry. That's tomorrow. In this webinar, we focus on quadrilaterals. We go from very basics to 700 level data sufficiency questions here. So again, that's 24 hours from now. So if you're exploring the eGMAT course, you probably have heard about eGMAT verbal. You probably haven't heard as much about eGMAT quant because it's fairly new. This will tell you a lot about eGMAT quant and why it delivered the most Q49 or higher scores in 2021. and actually still in 2022 as well. Then next week we have a sentence correction webinar. We'll talk about the meaning-based approach and that E-GMAT invented, in the third generation, that approach. And essentially we'll also solve an SC question today. So many of you may have may be interested in knowing how do you take the approach that we discussed today and apply it to a larger subset of questions. That's this webinar for you guys. All right. Actually, we have another free webinar on how many of you are interested in scholarships? Let me just put in a poll question. How many of you are looking to get a scholarship? And I'm going to remove the yes no poll from the prior session. Okay. All right, 99% of you. Okay, that's good. So we have an upcoming free session on our YouTube. We'll try and do a lot more of it this year. So E-GMAT get upwards of about $40 million worth of scholarship every year. So we have this session on Tuesday, 1st of February. I'll be actually hosting this session where we'll talk to one of our students as to how he got a 120K scholarship and which schools is he choosing, because he got scholarships from multiple schools. So definitely register for that one as well. With that, let's kind of get to know you guys a bit better. I'm going to ask two poll questions. One is, when do you plan to take the test? And the second is, what's your target GMAT score? That will tell us how ambitious this group is, and when are you looking to go about taking the test. So about half of you have not taken a data as of yet. Another 26% are in that 46 to 75 day bracket, and about 24% are in the 0 to 45 day bracket, out of which about 8 of you are in the next 16 days or so. With regards to the target GMAT score, that's 730 to 750 bracket seems to be the most popular one. 760 or higher is also really popular, and then about 18% of you, or 17% as of now, are in that 600 to 720 bracket, or about 600 to and about 6% of you are in the 600 to 700 bracket. That's wonderful. With that, let's go right into the webinar. So this is the webinar pane. Let me just walk you through the logistics of this. You see the presentation, that's what I'll be using. I'll be talking to a presentation. Below the presentation, you have a Q&A part or a question and answer part. If you have a question during the presentation, post that question there. On the right-hand side is the space for my questions, which means that if I have a question, I'm going to put in a multiple choice poll part over there, or if I want a qualitative response from you, I'll put in an open-ended question part, which is what's there, which is host question, short answer. So the right-hand side is my area to ask you. Bottom of the screen is your area to ask us. And that's the reason why we have multiple hosts here, is so that if you have a question, you can ask that question during the webinar, and Sandeep and Harsha can respond to it, so that you still get your question answered, and essentially we carry on with the webinar. Okay, audio should be really good. The way I'm looking at it, I am getting all the bars. So if audio is breaking at your end, it probably is your internet connection. Okay. All right. So how would we go about doing this? And again, Harsha and Sandeep, they will tell me if the audio is breaking. So I'm not as concerned about it. Just from a location standpoint, I'm in Phoenix, Arizona. Harsha is in Bangalore, and Sandeep is some place in Odisha. Okay, so we'll kind of keep this very simple. We'll divide this webinar into 3 distinct parts. We'll talk about how does the GMAT work. If you want to understand how to prepare for the GMAT, you got to understand how the GMAT actually works. That's going to be our first part. Okay. The second part's going to be, how do you build that study plan? A lot of you have been asking about it. Unless and until you have that foundation of how the GMAT works, you'll not really be able to logically argue how to go about building that study plan. So we'll use that foundation to build that personalized study plan. And then from that point on, we'll really look at, okay, once you have that study plan, how do you execute that study plan so that your preparation is predictable, so that you know when you're going wrong, not when you take mocks, but right when you're preparing. So this is what this piece is going to be all about. Okay, now I'm not going to ask you to write down a bunch of things. In fact, you'll have this presentation with you by the end of the session. We'll share that presentation, but I'm going to ask you to write down about 2 or 3 things during the webinar. And one of the first things that I want you to take away from this webinar is what does it take to ace the GMAT, and that's building ability, building your muscle on the topics that the GMAT test. And the reason why I want you to take this away from this is essentially, you know, a lot of people, when it comes to acing the GMAT, think about timing and a bunch of other things. They really start stressing about these things right from the get-go. And I see that about more than half of you not even started your preparation or so, or have more than 45 days before your test. Don't stress about this early on. This is something that you should worry about only in the last 15 to 18 days or so. Once you build that ability, once you are 80-85% through to the journey to your target GMAT score. So, or in other words, if you're aiming for a 760, start worrying about this once you hit that 700, 710. If you're aiming for a 730, start worrying about this once you hit that 680, 690 or so. Because if you start worrying about this early on in your preparation, you would never even hit a 680, 690. Okay. Again, guys, questions in the Q&A part, which is right below the presentation, not on the right-hand side. I'm actually going to remove this part so that you don't post your questions. And yes, you will get a recording of your session. Okay. All right. So when I say acing the GMAT's about building ability, let's kind of make sure what ability is, because ability is not a term that the GMAT uses loosely. In fact, it's a very quantifiable term on the GMAT. The GMAT gives you your ability scores. And so I just want to make sure you understand what ability is, and in the context of what accuracy is, because accuracy on the GMAT is not a very precise term. In fact, 3 days ago, got an email from one of our students. He said, I took 2 official tests. Test 1, I made 14 mistakes and I got a verbal score of 33. Test 2, I made 11 mistakes and I got a verbal score of 31. How the hell is that possible? My answer was because, as we always say, accuracy is a very imprecise metric on the GMAT. What's accuracy? You take a 10-question quiz. Let's say you get 8 out of 10 correct. And essentially you say my accuracy is 80%. Now, when you say your accuracy is 80%, it just tells you how you did on that quiz. It doesn't tell you how did you do on that quiz compared to others. Your accuracy on a quiz might be 80%, but your ability based on that might be 50th percentile if half the people who take the same set of 10 questions get 8 out of 10 or more correct. On the other hand, ability is a comparative measure. So again, you may take another quiz of 10 questions, you may get 7 out of those 10 correct. Your ability may be 90th percentile if 90% of the people who take that quiz get 6 or fewer questions correct. So the question is so difficult. Again, ability, always the proper measure on the GMAT. It's a comparative measure. Accuracy, an absolute measure, not a great measure on the GMAT. Okay. So with that, let's kind of understand how the GMAT works and why do we say it's a test of ability and not one of accuracy. So what I have over here is I'm simulating a very simplistic adaptive test algorithm. The GMAT's a bit more complex, but in general, it follows the same principle. Okay. Now on the y-axis over here, what you have is difficulty level of the question. The higher you go on y-axis, the more difficult a question becomes. On the x-axis is the progression of the test. So, as you go from question number 1 to question number 6, that's what the x-axis really says. So let's take case 1. Case 1 is the blue line on top. Okay. So student 1 or case 1, and for simplicity, and this is also what happens for 90% of the GMAT cases. So the first question that you get is of a medium difficulty level. Student 1 or case 1 gets that first question, gets that right, then gets a second question, which is a bit more difficult. Why do we know this? Why? Because we are going higher over here in this case. And as you go forward, he gets a second question, he gets that right as well. Then gets a third question, which is even more challenging. And you can really see as you go from question number 1 to question number 3, the difficulty goes up. He gets that wrong. Question number 4, as a result, is the difficulty level is between that of question number 3 and 4. So let's kind of draw horizontal lines from here. You can see 4 is right here between 3 and 4, and question number 5 is he gets that right, so he gets question number 5, which is a bit more challenging. Okay. Now let's kind of look at what student 2 does. So we're going to only simulate 5 questions, otherwise, I mean, the process repeats just like that. Student 2, or case 2 as we really see, gets the first question. Let's just look at this. Medium difficulty level, gets that wrong. Consequently, gets an easier question, gets that right. Gets the third question, which is a bit more challenging. You can really see it's actually between question. The difficulty level is between the first question and the second question. If you draw horizontal lines, you can see it's slam dunk in between. Gets that wrong. Gets the fourth question. As you can see, it's going down on the difficulty level path. It's easier. Gets that right, and gets the fifth question right as well. Now, when you look at this over here, if we were to stop the test at question number 5, we say, let's say the test is only for 5 questions. Who do you think at this point, if we were to stop the test, would be doing better? And let's just put in let me clear all answers. I want to put in a proper poll here. Who is doing better? Let's just clear all answers. Who's doing better, student 1 or student 2? All right. 90% of you say it's actually student 1. And the correct answer is student 1. Let me end the poll, broadcast the results. The correct answer is student 1. I want to first ask folks who chose student 2. Why did you choose student 2? I mean, what made you think? Because I want to understand, address those questions that you have. For those of you who chose case 2 or student 2, why did you think case 2 was doing better than case 1? If you were to stop the test at question number 5. His slope is positive. Okay, interesting. All right. That's a good plausible response. Okay. Okay, so just how the GMAT works, improving ability as per the plot. Yes, but think about it. What has student 2? Has the student 2 proven to the GMAT that he can answer questions that are more challenging than median difficulty level? Has the student 2 proven till question number 5 that he can answer questions that are more difficult than the median difficulty level? Yes, no. Just you can type no over here now. I'm sorry. I wanted to. No, he hasn't. Has student 1 proven that with some degree of reliability that he can answer questions that are more challenging than the median difficulty level? Yes. Yes, I mean, with a decent degree of reliability. Yes. So that's kind of why student 1's doing better. Why? Because to the GMAT, even though both students have identical accuracy, they've answered 3 out of 5 questions correctly. The accuracies for both of them are 60%. Because the difficulty level of questions that student 1 has answered is a lot higher, for the GMAT, student 1's way better than student 2. In fact, student 1 is around that 70th percentile, or if you were to translate this to a score out of 800, he's around that 650. Student 2 at this point would be around that 550 or so. So there'd probably be 100-point difference between student 1 and student 2 if we were to end the test at this point over here. Okay. Now, one thing that I want you to imagine is just from a yes/no poll over here. Has any one of you, or rather, let's just say, I think I shouldn't say has any one of you because I'm sure some of you have. Have you guys hired people? I mean, hired people at your work to really say, hey, to work for you or to work for someone else? Have you hired people, yes or no? Let's see how many of you. Just a poll above, please. Don't type your answers. Don't put in so much effort when we have a poll. But 22% of you have hired people. That's good. Now, even if you haven't hired people, I think it's hiring someone's a very logical process. So you'd probably understand this over here. The way the GMAT works is very similar to how you would behave if you were hiring people. And if you remember this, you can apply this to every aspect of the test. Okay, in fact, even to the preparation aspect of the test. So, so think about it. Let's say you were hiring someone for a director level position. So just to put a context over here, director is what I call as a mid-management position. Why? Because above the director, so this is director, above the director, you have a VP, you have an SVP, and then you have essentially someone from the executive team, okay, and then you have the CEO. Just very, very simple. Below the director, you have senior manager, you have manager, and then you have essentially people who are individual contributors as well. Okay, so that's kind of where it is. Now you're kind of trying to hire this guy over here, and you are this VP. Okay, now if you get someone who's in the interview and you ask that person very difficult questions, so difficult questions that an SVP should answer correctly, and if the candidate who you are interviewing makes a mistake on them, would you reject that candidate? Yes, no? You can actually type it this time. No, you won't. Why would you not? Why would you not? You won't. Because you're hiring for a director level position. This is a much more challenging question. You don't expect this guy to answer this correctly. If he answered it correctly, then he's overqualified, right? Okay. Now, if for the same guy you ask questions which were at a managerial level, and if he made a mistake over here, and you ask 2 questions, 3 questions, the guy still made a mistake, what would your judgment be? Again, this time the questions are managerial level. Not to hire. Most likely this guy is not fit. That's how the GMAT works as well. Okay. The difference over here is the GMAT has to hire everyone. The only thing is the GMAT has to decide at which level do you need to hire someone. So someone who gets a 760 is that executive or that CEO level, whereas someone who gets a 650 is that the director level, and so on and so on. So GMAT hires everyone. It's just that scores a decision of what's the level that you've got to hire this person at. That's kind of the difference over here. At a certain level, does that make sense? Yes, no? Okay. So if you remember this, you'd be able to understand how the GMAT works in a very simple thing. Okay. Now, then what does it take to ace the GMAT, right? Just let's go back to these 2 guys. Student 1 or case 1 got 5 questions. Each of these questions was either at the average difficulty level, which was the first question, or above the average difficulty level. Student 2 or case 2 didn't even get to solve a question which was above the average difficulty level till question number 5 over here. Okay, so when you look at this, whenever you look at this data or any data point, you've got to draw inferences. So what inferences do you draw from this? First is, you want to ace the GMAT, there's this thing called the question picker, or the equivalent of an interviewer, and you've got to make sure that that question picker or the interviewer serves you difficult questions. Why? Because difficult questions have more points. And the second challenge is to make sure that you answer them correctly, because that's the only way to get difficult questions served to you. Okay, so what does it help you conclude? It's that hey, your GMAT score is governed by your ability to answer difficult questions correctly. Okay, that's really important. You've got to build that ability to answer difficult questions correctly. Very similar to before going to the interview. I mean, your ability is what your ability is. That interview doesn't decide what your ability is. Okay, what decides what your ability is what you do before the interview, how you prepare for the interview, what you've done, so on and so forth. Okay. But the GMAT says that acing the question at the beginning is not a guarantee for a high score. Absolutely. That's absolutely correct. Yes. And I did not say that you've got to ace the initial questions. Did I say that? Did I say you've got to ace the initial questions? No. In the example that we talked about, actually we talked about it, if you director level person, you give a vice president level question, would you hold that person? Would you hold that against him? No, you won't hold that against him. Again, if the initial question is hard, doesn't matter if you get it wrong. But if the initial question is easy, then what? If the initial question is easy, what happens then? Are you going to hold it against the candidate? Absolutely, yes. Yes. It's again, as I said, think about hiring someone. The GMAT works exactly the same way. Okay. So, and I'm going to answer those questions. What's the value of the first 10 questions? Should you worry about them? How much time should you spend? Those things, we're going to answer those. But before you get a good answer to those, you've got to understand how the GMAT works. Because if you understand how the GMAT works, you won't need me to answer those questions. You will be able to infer or those answers automatically. Okay. So when you are in this session, forget about everything that you've learned about the GMAT. Because if you've learned the right things, this session will only reinforce those. If you've learned the wrong things, then you know, that'll interfere with your learning. Now, once I'm done with certain aspect of it, you should ask questions so that you confirm if someone else has told you something else. But listen to this with an open mind, because everything that I'm going to share with you, I'm going to back it up with a ton of data. Okay, and just to back my future claims up for the next 10 minutes, I can tell you, last year on GMAT Club, you know, there were about students reported about 530 or 700 plus scores. Our students accounted for about 280 of them. Okay, so about 55% of all 700 plus scores. So what you get over here is something that is backed by a lot of data. All right, GMAT as a test of ability. So here are two students, and this is a screenshot of the old. What you have as official exams are called official GMAT exams. When we took the GMAT, which is when I took the GMAT, we used to have the GMAT Prep. It was a software which we would download on our desktop, and it was an incredible piece of software. I actually sometimes feel bad for you guys, because what you have is not as good as what we had. And so over the last few years, the GMAT algorithm, the scoring algorithm hasn't changed. It's just that the GMAT's now delivered online, and they give you a lot fewer analytics than what we used to get. So on the GMAT Prep, this is a 2018 data point. The verbal section was 41 questions, which is where you see 1 to 41 over here. And what you see is a student's attempt on these 41 questions. And when you compare these two students, so this is student number 1, this is student number 2. When you compare these two students, their attempts seem identical from question number 11 onwards. Those attempts are identical. The only difference is this guy made these two mistakes over here. And I want to make sure that you understand what happens when you look at data through a lens of accuracy. Okay, you kind of draw inferences which are not correct in the context of the GMAT. They may be correct in the context of the GRE. They may be correct in the context of and the CAT, which is an Indian equivalent of the GMAT, but not in the context of the GMAT. Now, if you look at these two students, you say, okay, this guy has made 9 mistakes. This guy has made 11 mistakes. So the scores, yes, student 1 should be better than student 2, but they should be similar if you purely looked at accuracy. The reality is their scores are very different. Student 1 got a 97th percentile, which means since about 200,000 people take the GMAT every year, so what the test told student 1 was that, hey, you are among the top 6,000 students worldwide who has attempted the verbal section. Student 2 got a V32, which means that the GMAT told him you are in the top 70,000 students. Now, how many of you, when you look at this over here, the first thing, or you're really just, you're saying, and you're asking yourself and scratching your head and saying, hey, the GMAT seems really harsh. Okay. How many of you are saying, hey, the GMAT's harsh? Let me just get a yes, no poll here. Is the GMAT harsh? That's the question. Is the GMAT harsh? How many of you are thinking the GMAT's harsh? How many of you are thinking it's not harsh? Three. Come on, I need more answers. I have just about 90 responses so far. I want to get to, and I know it's not a difficult question, just take a position. The beauty about this session is Doesn't matter if you're wrong. If you're right, it reinforces what you learn. If you're wrong, it tells you where you need to improve. I've got 115 responses so far. Come on, guys, I have 210 students here. Can I get 150 responses? The question is, given this data, do you think is that the GMAT's harsh? Yes or no? Because this may be pivotal to how you approach your GMAT preparation, this understanding. And then this leads to the first 10 questions. This leads to all of those answers over here. All right. I have about 130 responses. I'll have to contend with 130. So you can see about 58% of you think the GMAT's harsh. 42% of you think it's not harsh. So for those of you who think that the GMAT's harsh, why do you think the GMAT's harsh? For those of you who answered yes. And again, don't give me the MBA answer, it depends. Most of the times I'm going to give you all the information that you need. That MBA answer, it depends, is usually when you're working with imperfect information. It's not about verbals very confusing. It was based on the data that you got. Is the GMAT harsh? Based on this data point. Yes or no? This is the only data point. As I said, don't bring your own data points here. Is the GMAT harsh? For those of you who said, no, the GMAT's not harsh. For those of you who said the GMAT's not harsh. Okay. Why do you say that? Okay, guys. Yes, people got their opportunity. Let's talk about no people. People who said the GMAT's not harsh. Okay, it's the same for everyone. It's an objective measure of how you perform on difficult questions. It's tricky, it's not harsh. All right. Not harsh, but confusing. Okay. All right. Let me just say this. First of all, let me just add some context, right? I run a test prep company. For me, the best thing is if the GMAT were harsh. But the truth is, the GMAT's not harsh at all. Tell me one thing. This guy got 9 out of 41 questions wrong. Okay. Now listen to me. This guy got 9 out of 41 questions wrong. On how many tests you can get about a quarter of questions wrong and still get a 97th percentile? Quarter of questions wrong and still get a 97th percentile. Not a whole lot. Okay. The GMATs is one of the most well-designed tests out there, which is why over the last decade, the GRE has become much more like the GMAT, where it has deprecated those word lists. The SAT has become a lot more. In fact, the SAT in 2 years is going to be completely online. I don't know if you've heard of that. And they're making it much more like the GMAT. Okay. IIT is actually one of the other exams where you can have a really low accuracy and a very high ability. That's very good. Okay. Percentile depends on sample size. Yes, in principle, that's true, but the sample size on the GMAT hasn't changed a whole lot. That's something that I will tell you. It's been around 200 to 250K people every year. Okay. All right. The GMAT's not a very harsh exam. So I'm going to really tell you how does the GMAT work and why is it that this guy got a V32 and whereas this guy got a V47. But the first two questions which the second person got wrong probably compensate for the next 11. Let's look at this. I think I'm going to ask you for answers when I give you enough information to answer this question. So I'm going to remove that broadcast results. Let me explain how the GMAT works. And if you understood the prior part, this is going to be just a natural progression for it. Okay. So take away the GMAT's not harsh, very forgiving test. If you have the ability, you can make mistakes and essentially you can still get an excellent score. If you don't have the ability, you can't trick the test. It's a very, very fair test. And that's the very definition of the test. So let's kind of look at both these cases over here. We're going to start with student 2. Student 2 who got the first two questions wrong. So he got the first question, median difficulty level, got that wrong. Median difficulty level means half the people get it right. Then the second question, 35th percentile level, which means 65% of all GMAT test takers answer it correctly. Someone was asking, how do you determine whether a question is easy, medium, or hard? That's how you determine. You float it out to 10,000 people, and if about 70% of them answer it correctly, then that's an easy question, or medium difficulty question. If 90% of them answer it correctly, it's an easy question. That's how the GMAT determines. That's how we determine whether a question is easy, medium, or hard. So you got the third question. You got the first question wrong, 50th percentile, or the second question, 35th percentile. The third question, 15th percentile question, which means 85% of those people who get this question answer it correctly. Then he got that right. He got a 25th percentile question. Okay. Then he got a 35th percentile question, 40th percentile question. Now, remember the interviewer? If you are an interviewer, isn't that how you would do? You get an interviewee, he gets a basic question wrong, a 50th percentile question wrong. Then you actually ask an easier question. Then you ask an easier question till that person gets it right. Isn't that how you'd go about doing that? Yes, no, if you were to interview someone? That's how you would go about doing it, right? And then you'll progressively increase your difficulty. Yes, that's how the GMAT works as well. Okay, so this guy got questions right. Now, by the time he got to that 700 level questions, he started making mistakes again. And which is where the test evaluated his difficulty level and changed his difficulty level. Student 1, on the other hand, got the first 6 questions right. And then he continued to get them right. So even when he was getting those 700 level questions, he continued to get them right. So he continued to get difficult questions and he was acing those. So the GMAT actually said, oh, this guy really knows his stuff. Now you guys were looking at this from a lens of accuracy. You said, hey, this guy made 9 mistakes. This guy made 11 mistakes. Both of these were our students, by the way. So this was their GMAT prep data. Their actual GMAT attempt, this guy got a V44, which is a 98th percentile. This guy got a V35, which is I think a 72nd percentile or so. So the GMAT prep test was spot on with estimating their abilities, okay? But the GMAT doesn't care about these mistakes. What the GMAT has is its own ability engines, and it measures ability. Remember I said the GMAT's a test of ability. So the V43 guy, these were his abilities in SCCR and RC. This is what the GMAT measured internally. What it said is, when it comes to sentence correction based on the SC questions served to this guy, he's among the top 5 percentile of students. Similarly, CR very, very similar. RC, he's among the top 13 percentile of students. Student 2, these are his abilities. In SC, he's among the top 20 percentile. In RC, he's among the top 41 percentile. Okay. When you look at these guys through the lens of ability, do they look different? Do they look very different? Yes, that's what the GMAT does. That's what an interviewer does. My voice is absolutely clear. Again, remember, let's kind of look at this over here. I want to ask this one question, and this I think will. What kind of internet connection do you guys have? Let's just do this over here, and I'm going to actually put this question here. What kind of internet connection do you guys have? Is it a regular internet where you're getting a wire to your house and you're distributing internet through a Wi-Fi modem from there? Are you using a mobile hotspot? Are you using, a dongle as it's called, or something else? Okay, 84% of you are using a regular internet. Now, the platform that we are using, it doesn't require a whole lot of internet speed, but this is a very high quality real-time platform. This is not like YouTube or Zoom, which buffers information and has a delay. This is a very high quality real-time platform. That's how you get the polls in real time, and which is what makes learning fun. Okay. If you're using a mobile hotspot or a cellular broadband, they are not designed for real-time communication. As someone who used to design cell phone networks, I know this, and even with 5G, it's never going to be dedicated bandwidth. So we only use about 100 kilobits, but it's real-time 100 kilobits. So if you're using a mobile broadband, there will be times when the audio would be a bit more choppy because the system aims to keep all of this real time, which is why you're able to see everyone's responses, which is why we're able to do these many polls. Okay. So yeah, if you're using a mobile broadband, the audio will get choppy for you. If it gets choppy beyond a certain point, join again. When you reset a mobile connection, it actually stays good for the next 20 minutes or so. All right. So your GMAT score is designed by your ability to answer difficult questions correctly. That's something that I want you to take away. It doesn't matter the first 10 questions or so on and so forth. Okay, if you have the ability, you're going to get that score. If you don't have the ability, you can't trick the test. That's something that I want you to take away from this. So there are a few other takeaways that come from this over here. So your GMAT score is composed of 5 ability scores. Everyone worries about their score out of 800. What a lot of people don't know is that you get 5 distinct ability scores, which based on which that score of 800 is determined. On the quant side, you have algebra, geometry, and arithmetic. On the verbal side, you have SCCR and RC. These are ability scores that the GMAT calculates. Okay. Now, each of these subsections is independent, which means you can mess up CR and you can get a 97 percentile on SC. That's absolutely possible. The difficulty level of questions on SC is not determined by how you do in CR or how you do in RC and vice versa. Similarly, in various subsections of quant. No one subsection has a greater weight than the other. All of them have very, very similar weights to the extent that within 1% similarity. A lot of people think RC is more, carries a higher weight, or CR is not as important because CR has fewest questions. No, it's just that when it comes to CR, the GMAT can determine your ability in about 9 questions or so. And SC and RC, it needs more questions. Okay. You need a target ability in each subsection. That's really important. Why? Because as I said, the combination of these ability scores leads to that quant and that verbal score, and that quant plus verbal score leads to that score of 800, score out of 800. So you need a target ability for each subsection. Why? Because essentially you're going to be naturally good at something. You're not going to be naturally weak at something. So it doesn't make sense for you to say, if I'm aiming for a 730, I'm going to score 95th percentile in every subsection. No, that doesn't make sense. What makes sense is where you really say, okay, if I'm good in SC, let me maximize my strength. Let's get a 97th percentile. And if I'm really poor in RC, let's not aim for that 90th percentile. Let's aim for the 70th percentile. That way I use my resources, I use my time properly, because that would still help you get to that 730. And we're going to see that quantification later on. The last 2 points are really important. One is that how you go about building ability. What do you do in stage 1 of learning, stage 2 of learning, and stage 3 of learning? That remains the same whether you're doing that for number properties in arithmetic or whether you're doing that for sentence correction. Okay. And as I said, each one of you is likely to have different strengths, different weaknesses. So your starting points on each of these subsections, they're likely to be different. Overall, in each algebra and in each of these subsections, there are about 25 starting points that exist. Okay. So these are the points that I want you to make sure you understand, because these determine how you look at the GMAT. Now, what this means is, when you're thinking about getting a certain GMAT score, ask yourself, what are my target abilities here? You need to have that sort of target determined properly. Let me ask this, why do you need this target ability? Why do you need this target ability? Can you answer this? Why not just study, study, study? Okay. You need this target ability to make sure, and a lot of you think, hey, I have infinite amount of study time. You don't. Okay. You need that target ability so that you know where you're going to put in that study time, number one. You need that target ability so that you study with the right attitude. Okay. Let me just ask this. How many of you are aiming for a 90th percentile in SC? Okay. Good. A lot of you are. And now I'm going to ask you an unpleasant question. Okay. But I want you to be completely honest with yourself and tell me, while doing the last SC study session, regardless of where you were doing, how many of you really just said, okay, after 15-20 minutes, let me go and watch a short video on YouTube? Be very honest. Yes. Do you think if you do that, you're going to get to that 90th percentile? You're going to be among the top 10% of students taking the GMAT worldwide in sentence correction? The answer is no. Acing the GMAT is as much about self-control and dedication as it is about content. Okay. Or metrics. It's about your attitude. And it's about your ability to tell yourself what you're not going to do while studying and executing on that. Because we can give you the best plans there are. It's you who has to build ability. I'm not going to be able to give you a question that you're going to get on the test. No. I'm going to give you the principles that would be tested on the test. Okay. So, really important to understand, if you're aiming for that 90th percentile, what is that attitude that you're going to study with? And what is it that you're not going to do while you're studying? Okay. CP has a great question. It says, when a new subsection starts, does it start from an average difficulty level or based on the previous subsection's response? No, it doesn't base itself on the previous subsection's response. It starts with its own independent assessment. Great question, CP. Okay. So, you can make mistakes on the GMAT. Now, till now, what I've showed you are examples on GMAT prep, as well as examples on how the GMAT works in principle. This is a real data point for you. One of our former students who improved from a V17 to a V40. V17 is 15th percentile score on GMAT verbal. V40 is 91st percentile score on GMAT verbal. Okay. Now this guy made a ton of mistakes. This is his verbal test progression. Again, when questions were easy, were medium and medium hard, he got most of them correct. Again, as the composition of medium to medium hard changed, he actually made more mistakes. As the questions became hard, he actually got half of them wrong. He was still able to get that 91st percentile. As I said, you can make mistakes and still get a great score. Okay. Now you guys want to download the CSR or enhanced score report. This is an official score report that the GMAT gives you. That's something that you can get as well. Let's just see, where did we have that? Yeah, it's here. So this guy is number 5, Aksul, I believe, which says download ESR. If you click on it, you should be able to get to his debrief. You should be able to download the ESR from there. Okay, let's go. And I'll share this. So let's kind of answer some key questions. Some key questions. Do the first 10 questions matter? Should you approach them any differently? Should you spend more time? And what I want you to do is, I want you to put in, because there are 3 questions, I'm going to put in a poll question here. I want you to say YNN, NYN, where Y means yes, N means no, and N means no, of course, or NN. So if your answer is no, just type in N, comma, N. If it's no, yeah. So let's get those answers. Let's get your answers to this. Again, put all 3 answers in a single row. I'm going to broadcast results when I get about 40-45 responses. Three, 2, and 1. Okay, the broadcast results. You can see YNN, NNN. Thank you so much for following the format. YYY, and so on and so forth. That's excellent. And you can see most of you are saying YYY, or at least have 2 Y's in here. Okay, let me tell you my response to this. So the first 10 matter, yes, they do. Should you approach them any differently? Absolutely not. And should you spend more time? No, you'd be doing yourself a disservice if you spend more time. Okay. So let's talk about why that is the case. All right. Again, as I said before, On the GMAT, you don't ace the test by tricking the test. You ace the test by expressing what you already know. Okay. So let me tell you, if you're truly a 90th percentile student, um, essentially, what does that mean? If you're a 90th percentile student, by definition, this means this, which means that when it comes to medium questions, your accuracy on medium difficulty questions is 90%. When it comes to medium hard questions, you can get 80% of them correctly. And when it comes to hard questions, you're able to answer between 6 and 7 out of 10 correctly. Okay, which means your probability of getting a question incorrect if it's medium difficulty level is 1 in 10. If it's hard, is between 3 and 4 out of 10. Now, in the first 10, if you express yourself properly, and if you get medium questions, are you likely to get a whole lot of them correct? A whole lot of them wrong, I'm sorry? Given who you are? No, you're not. If you are a 90th percentile student before the test, that's how you're going to perform. If, by the way, the test does serve you a hard question in the first, and it might happen the test might serve you a hard question. Do you think the test is going to hold it against you if you answer it incorrectly? No, because the test understands that even a 90th percentile guy gets hard questions wrong. Okay. Now, what happens when you do things differently? A lot of people, excuse me, say, I'm going to try and get this 100%. I'm going to even remove that 10% by spending more time. What happens when you approach questions, not how you would approach them normally, but you kind of are extra careful while doing that. When you do that, these stats, I need to change my fill. Really just say no fill. These stats no longer hold true. When you really say, I'm going to approach this, I'm going to make sure I look at each and every angle, most likely you would end up making a mistake, which you usually won't. These stats then go to 70-30. And you've experienced this because when you spend more time, you go back, you revise that thing, and you really end up, you initially might have chosen the correct answer, you end up choosing the incorrect one. Does that happen? When you're extra careful, you change your behavior, you find you don't perform as well. You overthink. Yes. It happens. It happens. It's happened with most of you. Okay. I'm not saying rush through the first 10, but I'm saying don't consider them any special. It's just the way you should really go about doing this is the way you practice before the test. Okay. If you have the ability, if you are truly a 90th percentile person, a student, you will get the first 10 right if they're medium difficulty level, and if you have a set of hard questions, then yes, you'll make some mistakes, but that's not, the test is not going to hold that against you. Okay. So should you worry about the first 10? In some ways, yes, but don't treat them any different. Just go about it. And the only thing that I would really just say is before the test, do 4 or 5 warm-up questions so that your brain knows when it sees an SC question, what's the first step it's going to do? What's the second step it's going to do? When it sees a number properties question, it knows this is the first step that I'm going to do. So just do some warm-up. Very similar to how when you go and play a sport, you've got to do some warm-up. Do the same thing here. Okay. We've talked about this. Even these people, I'm going to share their success stories. People who scored 780, they made mistakes. Their accuracies on our Scholinium platform, as well as in their ESR, they weren't 100%. They still made mistakes on hard questions. This guy who's going to be studying at GSP Chicago, he made mistakes despite getting a V47 on GMAT Verbal. Okay. So takeaways. Focus on building that ability. Don't do anything different on the test. I mean, don't be extra cautious about things. Why? Because essentially, if you build that ability before the test, you want to make sure you express yourself properly. And if you don't have the ability, don't take the test. That's what I would say. Otherwise, it just hurts. What happens is if you don't have the ability, some people just go and take the test, then they go and reset their preparation. And I'm sure some of such people are here. I have 200 folks here in the webinar. I'm sure some of you went into the test knowing you're not going to do as well. Am I correct? With that knowledge, you went in. Yes. What happened when you got a bad score? You actually reset your preparation. You lost that momentum. You had to really just say, I've got to do things differently. It doesn't matter what I knew before. And that resetting your preparation just, it negates all the things that you did prior to that. And it also, yeah, it creates doubts. So have solid metrics before you go into the test. Subhash says, could you provide approximate timing split for hard and medium level questions for this? Subhash, it all depends on you. This is something which we call as your tuck time, which is your time to answer a certain set of questions. And every student's different. Let me just say this. So if you're an EG Math student, go to your Scholar platform. Every quiz gives you your tuck time. Your Scholar platform defines your tuck time. In fact, it even tells you what your tuck time is compared to essentially when you're solving a question that primarily tests comparisons versus modifiers on SC, or number properties if it's a divisibility and remainders question versus one that purely tests primes. Okay. What books do I suggest? I don't suggest any book, to be very frank, because frankly, books don't track your performance. On a test such as the GMAT, you need something that tracks your performance. And the best books that exist today were written upwards of a decade back. The Manhattan books. Manhattan was sold to Kaplan, I think, in 2012 or so. All right, so let's see how do you get to your target ability in various subsections. Okay, and which is where Durgesh's question is really important, and Jyotsna as well. Jyotsna's question as well. A combination of subsection percentiles that help you get to the overall score of 760 or higher. Okay, so let's kind of look at this. Tell me, what does a study plan do? What does a study plan do? What's the job of a study plan according to you? Let's get some answers here. Excuse me. Okay. Makes you follow a schedule, helps you build momentum, helps you meet targets, okay, gives you direction, helps you increase the pace. Let's you focus on learning. Good answers. Okay. Maximize the time available, manage timing and accuracy. Study plan doesn't do that, by the way. Helps you delegate your time. Okay. All right. So let me tell you what I think is what a study plan does, and I'm going to really do that with with comparisons. I'm going to illustrate that. But at EGMAT, when we talk about study plan or study plans, because EGMAT does make upwards of 15,000 study plans every year or so, it answers 3 questions. Okay, one of them is what set of abilities will help me get to my target score? What's the most optimum way to get there? Okay, for each one of you, it gives you your target set of abilities. Then, given my starting ability and my target ability, how much time do I need to put in to get to those target abilities? And then where, which means at which stage of learning, someone asked, can self-study, can practicing questions help? Which stage of learning should I start with, given the delta between my starting and ending abilities, to make sure that I get there? Okay, so that's something that we will look at. All right, I'm going to give 2 students, both of these are students, starting at different study points, both of them. So Ayush got a 750, Rafaela got a 730. Ayush went to Columbia, Rafaela went to Harvard. We're going to look at how their study plans differed, even though their scores, target scores, were within those 20 points or so. Okay. So again, if you're an EG Matter, you should be able to create that study plan once you have taken a SigmaX mock, which is an EG Mat mock test, because a SigmaX mock gives you your starting abilities. Okay. So let's talk about Rafaela. She went from a 600. Let me make sure I get the right color. Let's get a blue here. A 600, which a Q36 and a V36, to a 730, which is a Q48. She ended up getting a Q48 and a V41. Okay, so the first thing, how did we get to that 600? She took a Sigma X mock, and she got these starting abilities. Now I want you to tell me, what do you observe? What do you infer from these starting abilities over here? You have 5 data points. Remember I said there are 5 subsectional abilities. This is, she took a Sigma X mock, she got these abilities here. What are your observations? RC and arithmetic need work, okay. Strong verbal, weak quant, yes. SC and CR are really strong, absolutely. She has an edge in verbal, yes, absolutely. RC and arithmetic are a bit weak. Not a bit, they're very weak. She's 60% of students are better than her in RC, and 85% of students are better than her in arithmetic. And half the students are better than her in algebra geometry. If you're a 700 scorer, you can't let that happen. Okay. So she put that data in our PSP, which is Personalized Study Planner, and she got these target abilities. Again, you can see the areas of major improvement. RC went from a 39th percentile to an 85th percentile. This is what she needed to improve. Okay. Algebra geometry, the tool, the Personalized Study Planner, this is an AI-driven engine. It recognized that she was stronger in algebra geometry. So it said, hey, from a 49th percentile, you should go towards an 83rd percentile. And the tool recognized that she was really weak in arithmetic. So it said, okay, let's kind of worry about getting you only to a 57th percentile, because we can get you to a 730 if you hit these target abilities. Okay. So again, what you see is, and by the way, these remain the same. We didn't really say, this is really good. You've got to maintain these. But other than that, these are the areas that you need to look at this. Okay. Do you need to prepare before giving a Sigma X mock? No. As long as you're aware of the various question types, this is the assessment that the mock needs to do. So you don't need to prepare before you take the Sigma X mock. Okay. All right. But takeaways. 3 areas to work on: reading comprehension. She's really bad at that. Arithmetic. She's really bad at it, but she doesn't need to get super good at it. And algebra geometry, again, she's average at it. She needs to get to really good at it. Okay. And that's really important about such decisions. What's really strategic about such decisions is that once you make these judgments, if you have 2 months to prepare, which is what Rafaela had, she could decide, and she had a clear idea that she had to focus on these areas. Okay, really important. Now, the next question which is there is, how much time do you need to get there? Now you have these starting abilities. Remember, these are your starting abilities, and these are your target abilities. I'm not talking about SC and CR because you can see the starting and the target are similar. Okay. So guys, I can see those questions in the short answer pod. Please don't put those questions in the short answer pod. I'm going to take one question which is relevant here, which is, how can the GMAT judge that an easy, medium, and hard question? The GMAT looks at average accuracy data for a certain question, which we call as a testing item for the last 2 years, and that's how it determines its difficulty. If it was difficult for the population, about 400,000 people 2 years ago, it's going to be difficult for you. Again, you are human. You've gone through the same learning curriculum that these people have gone through. Okay, that's how it judges the difficulty level of questions. Okay, so with that, where do you type questions? There's a Q&A pod which is right below the presentation. It's called a Q&A. Q&A stands for questions and answers. Please type your questions there, so that we have Sandeep and Harsha, they can respond to your questions. That way, my momentum isn't broken. Again, if you have a relevant question, please ask that there as well, and I'll answer those questions. But if you have a question which is more about EGMAT, please put it there. They'll be able to answer that. That way, we won't break the flow of the session. Okay, so then coming back to this, let's kind of, sorry about that. You have the current abilities, you have the target abilities. Now you've got to figure out how do you go from this point to this point. You get the time estimates as well, by the way. But then what do you study? And that's something where I want you to give you a mini tutorial on the EGMAT way of building abilities, which, by the way, it's how you build abilities everywhere. It's just we have manifested this into a very specific set of mechanisms. So when it comes to learning, everyone goes through 3 stages of learning. And this doesn't, it's regardless of whether you're learning SC or whether you're learning probability. The first thing is you start from the very basics, you learn all the core concepts and learn how to apply those concepts. That's the first stage of learning. This is where you're starting from the easiest of questions and going towards medium to a certain degree to a certain set of medium hard questions, but you're learning the fundamentals, you're learning the process in which you solve questions. Once you've done that, and for most people, this is where 70% of their time is spent. Okay. Then once you know how to apply concepts, once you have a very thorough knowledge of concepts, you actually go through the master application stage, which is where your ability goes from, this is where your ability gets to 55th percentile up to 55th to 60th percentile. This is where it goes from 55th percentile to a bare minimum of 70, but up to 85th percentile as well. And then once you get there, you go into the refinement phase, which is where you go from that 85th to that 95th percentile. EGMAT students, what do we call this phase? We have a specific name for mastering application, stage 2 of learning. What do we call it? Cementing, yes. Really important stage. A lot of people say, hey, I study SC, then I go and study CR and I forget SC. The problem is they just do this. They don't do this or don't hit the metrics here. And if you don't hit the metrics in cementing or mastering application, you go back to another subsection. You are going to forget that first subsection. Really important to do cementing. Okay. Again, these are the bare minimum thresholds. If you do stage 1 well, you will get to that 55th percentile. If you do stage 2 well, you'll get to that 70th percentile. And if you refine to perfection, depending on how much you refine, you can get to that 90th percentile or so. Okay. Okay. Somebody says, does PSP guide on a daily basis how much time to invest on each section and topics? No, it doesn't guide you. It actually asks you that question so that it defines how long do you need to study SC, how long do you need to study CR. And again, we don't tell you need to do this activity today, you need to do this activity tomorrow. Why? Because remember, when it comes to stage 1, let's go back. This is about excellence. I don't want to tell you should do those 4 activities if your concentration is not good. If the system's telling you studied verb ing modifiers, but you scored only 60. I don't want you to rush through that. I want you to go back to this because you scored just 60. The system evaluated that your proficiency wasn't good enough. So we tell you this is the sequence you've got to do in. This is how much time we believe you would take. But then there is feedback in real time. If you're not learning properly, go back to it, excel at it. If you tell you you're going to take 2 weeks and you end up taking 2.5 weeks, does it matter? Absolutely not. What matters is whether you do it well. And that's something that you need to remember. Why? Because most of you are going to be aiming for that 90th percentile in a certain subsection or so. And that attitude of studying like a 90th percentile student is something that you got to have. Okay, so we have this over here. Now, in terms of legend, really important what I'm going to show on next screen, because I'm going to map Rafaela's starting abilities to stages of learning. And if she already has an ability, this means that she need not study that. This dotted thing is where she needs to put on her focus. And this is where, because she's not aiming for as high a score, she doesn't need to do this. Okay. So for Rafaela, remember her starting abilities in SC and CR were really good. She was around that 90th percentile. Her goal primarily over here is to maintain that ability. She doesn't need to go through our SCCR courses. She doesn't need to do cementing. She probably will do cementing. It doesn't take that long, but primarily her focus is to maintain and replicate that ability. On the other hand, in RC, okay, she has to start from the very beginning. She has to start from stage one. Similarly, on the quant side as well. Why? Because even in arithmetic, she's at that 49th percentile. Then she has to do master application over here. And then only in algebra, where she's aiming for that 85th percentile, she has to refine to perfection. Okay. Does that help? Does that help? Okay, let's look at how this is different from Ayush. Okay, same thing. Ayush took the sigma x mark. He scored a 670. These were his starting abilities. What are your observations here? Look at the starting abilities. CR and RC are weak. SC and CR need improvement. Really strong quant. RC is pretty good, actually. These are the areas of weakness. So it's kind of what I call as Rafaela's complement. She was really strong in SC and CR and weak elsewhere. This guy is really strong in those areas and is weak in SC and CR. Okay. So target milestones, again, we maintained his, or PSP maintained his quant abilities and said, hey, let's kind of try and see if we can push that RC. And then accordingly, it really said defined how much did he need to improve in SC and CR. Again, gave the time estimates, 1.1 weeks in RC, about 3 weeks dedicated in SC, and about 2 weeks dedicated in CR. Okay. Very, very similar. Again, he had to go through the 3 stages of learning. I want to make sure you remember this. The same legend applies. This is what he need not study. This is where he needs to focus on. And this is something that is not required because he's not aiming for such a high score. Quant, all he needs to focus on is maintain his performance. In RC, we said, you got to still master application, even though you're at that 80th percentile, you want to make sure that there are no gaps, but you don't need to do the basics. But in SC and CR, he needed to go through all the 3 stages of learning. That is where his focus was. Okay. So again, even though they were aiming, this guy was aiming for a 750, this guy was aiming for this girl was aiming for a 730. They're very, very different learning paths because the starting abilities were different. That path to that target GMAT score was very, very different. Just to really illustrate the difference, in SC, Ayush needed about 3 weeks. Rafaela needed about 2 days. Similarly, 2 weeks here, about 2 days here. Whereas in quant and RC, Rafaela needed a good 7 weeks, whereas Ayush needed fewer than 2 weeks over here. Again, you can really see. And again, what they study was very different, as you can see for Ayush and Rafaela. Okay, and this is what a study plan should. This is all done even before you start studying the first lesson. You should have this level of understanding. Where can you get this view? The one that's currently being shared? You actually get a slightly deprecated version of this view at the outset of PSP, where it tells you the stages of learning when you build your study plan. But very soon you'd be able to get this precise. This is the more refined view, but with the same information, you get a bit more deprecated view. Now, if you need that view for yourself, write to the strategy team if you have any problems. But again, if your starting abilities are below 50th percentile, you'll always start from basics. That's something that's there. And if you want, I'm going to share this PDF with you. You can create that view for yourself because this is the information that you guys know for each one of them. Okay. So a lot of you were asking about, hey, scholarships when it comes to admits. And I want to make sure that, you realize in 2022, when median scores at top schools, how many of you are, actually, I didn't ask this question. I have a good poll question here. I still have about 176 of you here. What kind of target school are you aiming for? And you see the options here. Option 1 says an M7 target, a US school in the US, a top 20 school in the US, a not top 20 school in the US. If you're aiming for Canadian B schools, European B schools, or Yeah. Let's get a few more data points. 3, 2, and 1. So you can see about 30. Again, I have slightly more than 100 responses. Let's get a few more responses. The question says, what kind of schools are you aiming for? The 3 people who say, I don't know what the heck you're talking about. That's good. I like that. But you can see I think the biggest population is aiming for an M7 school. We have a significant number of folks who are aiming for a T20 top 20 school, which is outside of M7. Actually, no one's aiming for a non-top T20 school, which is surprising because they have some really great bargains there. But 11%, 9% are aiming for Canadians, a significant number of you for European as well, and a significant number for Indian business schools. So that's wonderful. So US B schools absolutely love the GMAT. I mean, European B schools 710, 720, pretty safe score. Of course, 750, 760 are good, but they really say, okay, get a 720. We're happy with you. And then the few scholarships that they give, they're actually to high GMAT scorers or people who they're really impressed with. But when it comes to the USB schools, where you have a ton of scholarship money, about $300 million worth of scholarship money at the USB schools, that's where the GMAT really makes a huge difference when it comes to admits. So a lot of you said you want to go to an M7 school. So last year, when you are the world's most successful company, you also have a lot of people who get to these top schools. We actually looked at about 500 students who got into various business schools, but 100 of them got into M7 schools or so. And what we found was, and we also looked at people who applied and did not get in. So, but if you have a score of 740 or higher and you apply to an M7 school, you have a 28% chance. And these are primarily non-natives, not Americans. Okay, primarily non-natives. 28% of them got into it. Whereas if your score was in that 700 to 730 bracket, the likelihood of getting in was 13%. So you're looking at about a 2x improvement in chances. It doesn't mean if you get a 740 or higher, you'll definitely get into an M7. And M7 is a magnificent 7. So you have Harvard, Wharton, Booth, Columbia, I think Tux there, I believe, and Stanford is there. It's not, I wouldn't necessarily say the top 7 schools in the world. I have a lot of respect for INSEAD, for example, and LBS. It's not in M7. It's within the US. Or MIT Sloan, yes. Oh, those guys will kill me. So yeah, but having a higher GMAT score increases your chances. Okay. When it comes to scholarships, there's a really high correlation between 740 plus score and scholarship. So essentially, 45% of M7 admits who had a 740 plus score got a scholarship. 82% of T20 or top 20 admits who had a 740 score got scholarships overall, and the combined number was about 62% or so. Now, this is very interesting for us. And the guy who did that, he's currently studying at UNC Keenan Flagler. He was a 740 scorer. And he had 2 years to prepare after that 740 score. I kept on telling him, hey man, improve your score to a 760. He did not do that. And once he did this research, he kicked himself. So basically, the delta between a 740 and a 760 or higher score is about $45,000 or $35,000 worth of scholarship money, or so, which, by the way, is huge if you think about it. That's huge. So if you have a 740 plus score, and if you have time, I would. That's the reason I took the GMAT the second time, and I got multiple full rides. So I would definitely recommend aiming for a higher score. And all of this research is on our website. So there's an admits and scholarships page over there. You can really see, M7 admit stories, top 20 stories, European B school stories. You can also see interviews of people who've gotten scholarships and how they went about doing their application, what role did the GMAT play. All of that's there on our website, by the way. Okay. And like I said, 2021, we reported the most 700 plus scores. This data is only till 31st of August. The number for all of 2021 was, I think, about 270 for each GMAT. But you can see the ratio of eGMAT versus other prep companies, and this is even though these companies combined have 3 times as many students as we do. Also, a lot of you know us for Verbal. In June, we released our new quant course. Had a tremendous impact on the quant success of our students, and you can see Q49 or higher scores that were reported by EG Matters and by other companies. A lot of people say you have a lot of non-natives, so of course you'll have a lot of Q49 plus scores, but I mean, so do these guys. They have a lot of non-native students too. They don't get a lot of Q49 or higher scores. Okay. Again, you can see all of these on our YouTube channel. By the way, it's the largest connection of successful GMAT journeys. This number right now is about 220, I believe. This number is close to 60 right now. Okay, with that, okay, can I elaborate on the bargains that are outside of T20? Yeah, I mean, go to a 25th ranked school with a 740, you'll get a full ride. If you go to our YouTube channel, you'll get a few students who actually not only got a full ride, the school actually paid them money to study there. Kong Bui is one such student who got a 760. I think he went to Fisher. The guy is now working at Dell, and that guy got paid $1,700 in his pocket to study at Ohio Fisher. Great school, by the way. Other than scores, what factors does a scholarship depend on? Your likability during the interview. That's the only other factor. Okay, they love you during the interview and you have a good GMAT score, you'll get a scholarship. All right, let's go forward. Let's talk about so you have the study plan, you understand the right stage of learning. How do you make sure you don't get stuck at that 60th percentile? How many of you are stuck at that 60th percentile? Okay. A lot of you are. Okay. Let me answer a couple of questions that are there. We could then talk about how do you go from that 60th to a 90th percentile. How did you get Magoosh's data? All of this data is on GMAT Club, by the way. If you want to get the data, go to GMAT Club. They go to their reviews. Those reviews are organized chronologically. You can verify this data. So, and Magoosh has been actually right now the longest standing partner on GMAT Club. So their reviews you can see are the oldest. So Rishabh, hopefully that answers your question. Sriram says, on scholarships, if you get waitlisted with a 700 on the GMAT, can you still receive a scholarship if you retake the GMAT? Oh yeah, Ayush's journey was exactly the same. He had a 710, was waitlisted by Ross and Columbia, improved it to a 750, and he got an admit with scholarship. I think he got about 50, 70. So if you go to our YouTube channel, you'll see 2 interviews. One has a GMAT journey, the other one has his MBA journey. He talks about all of that in his MBA journey. Okay, so let's talk about that 90th percentile and 60th percentile. I'm going to just make sure that what's not the difference between a 90th and a 60th percentile person over here. Both in terms of a 60th percentile, approximately what it means is you're among the top 80,000 people in that particular subsection. It could be SC, it could be number of properties, it could be algebra, it could be PNC probability. The amount of time that a 60th percentile student spends learning versus a 90th percentile, that's not very different. Okay, the starting abilities are also very, very similar usually, and their overall capability to improve is also similar. It's not that one's super smart and the other one's not. Just to be very clear, these are things that don't make a difference. The GMAT's it's an exam that you can learn. It's not rocket science. Okay, so the thing that you've got to understand is 90th percentile is about achieving perfection. All right, because what you're really saying is you're better than those other people. You're better than 90% of the people who take the test. Okay, so how you approach has to be with an attitude to achieve perfection. And that's where, a 60th percentile student is very different from a 90th percentile student. A 60th percentile student considers, and I'm going to take sentence correction as an example, but essentially the same would apply to critical reasoning and to algebra as well. A 60th percentile student says, hey, GMAT SC is about learning all the major error types. I'm going to go and do that. And I understand splits as the way I'm going to do it. So while solving questions, I'm going to scan the options vertically. I'm going to look at the differences between options. And I'm going to then focus on what the options tell me. Okay. A typical 60th percentile student gets 7 to 10 feedback points while learning. And essentially a typical 60th percentile student says, I'm going to typically out of those 40 hours on SC spends about 12 to 15 hours learning, and then 70% of the time is just doing practicing, because that's the attitude that they have, that practice is going to make me perfect. And for them, GMAT Club is the best place in the world because it has an endless supply of practice questions. 60th percentile student, how many of you, does this resonate with you? Yes, no? Come on, be honest. Maybe many of you are not at 60th percentile because half the class hasn't even started preparing, but 72% of you really say yes. All right. A 90th percentile student thinks about the GMAT very differently. For him, GMAT SC is not so much about these error types. Yes, they are important, but it's about the 200 sentence structures that the GMAT tests and where these errors come. So a 60th percentile student really looks at this and says, hey, I've got to understand how these sentence structures impact the intended meaning, how they make a sentence illogical, how they lead to errors. And I'm going to focus on learning those sentence structures. Okay. A 90th percentile student looks at this and says, I understand the goal of GMAT SC is to make sure that the author is able to communicate the intended meaning most effectively. So meaning is the primary way he or she looks at solving questions. A 90th percentile student takes a lot more feedback while learning and spends way more time while learning or during stage 1, as we called before, than practice. Again, it's the same 40 hours. In fact, it probably could be fewer than 40 hours as well. And the majority of that time is spent learning and correcting as that person is learning based on these feedback points. Really, really important. A 90th percentile student, also something that's not written here, really important, is as he's studying SC, he or she does not go and study something else. He or she does not leave SC and study CR or number properties. He or she studies SC continuously for 8 to 12 days, however they need. And they also, if they're putting in a 90-minute study session, they also make sure that they don't watch YouTube. They may not study for 4 hours. Even if they're putting in 90 minutes, it's focused. They take those concepts, they take notes. That's what a 90th percentile student does. Again, it's the attitude, the feedback, and where you're spending time. All three are important. Okay. And the piece which is there is because on the GMAT, you will rarely get about these 200 odd sentence structures. And it's really difficult to master them if you don't get a whole lot of feedback. Why? Because essentially, think of achieving 90th percentile is very similar to drawing a straight line, a line that's more or less precisely straight without a ruler. If you don't have a ruler or a scale, you're not going to be able to draw a precisely straight line. It's not difficult. It's very easy with a ruler. That ruler gives you feedback. It keeps you on track. But if you don't have it, it's one of the hardest tasks in the world. As humans, we're not designed to do that. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to illustrate this, and I want you to solve this question the way you would go about solving a sentence correction question. And again, my goal is to illustrate the difference between a 90th percentile and a 60th percentile student. It's not to teach you sentence correction. If you want to learn sentence correction, please attend the webinar next week. Okay. Now, I don't want to time you guys. So what I want you to do is I want you guys to say still solving. So when you choose an answer choice other than still solving, I'm going to reopen the poll. So say still solving now. Then I know that you've answered this question, and now then I'm going to call time. Let's get about 50 people to say still solving. 46, 47, 48, 51. Good. And so, as I said, about 70% of you choose an option other than still solving. That's when I'm going to call time. Good luck, guys. Here is your question. All right, get those answers in. 80% of you are done. 3, 2, and 1. Let me end the poll and broadcast the results. This is how you guys did. But half of you chose choice C. 17% of you chose choice D. Another 17% chose choice E. And very few people chose choices A or B. So let's kind of go about doing this over here. Excuse me. So let's kind of look at and ask ourselves, do splits exist in this question if you were to go about the split space approach? And when you look at this over here, what you see is there are some startings, there's some beginnings. So you have the church coined in choices A and D, and you have that in choice E, and you have while in choice A and B, but then while with an ulterior motive and while a few experts claim. So it's just like, hey, these are not just 2 or 3 options. And then you have the contrast word but in choice in 4 of the choices, but then choice C doesn't have it. Overall, there are a bunch of other things as well. And essentially, if you do all the permutations, combinations, and that's very true for completely underlined sentences, you don't really see a ton of, it's very difficult to really look at this and even approach this using splits, which, by the way, we don't encourage anyone to use the splits approach for any question, regardless of whether it's, excuse me, completely underlined or not. Okay. So, because that's, the only way you can consistently solve every question correctly is the meaning-based approach. So the first thing you've got to do in meaning-based approach is essentially figure out what is it that the author intends to say. And to do that, we're going to do a sentence structure split, and we're going to figure out all the aspects that the author wants to communicate through the sentence. So this is a sentence structure, and you really say, okay, the church coined the date February 14th as Valentine's Day with an ulterior motive. So the first thing you really say is, hey, there are 2 claims that are there about why February 14th is Valentine's Day. That's celebrated. Okay, one is, the church coined this with an ulterior motive, and that motive was to Christianize the pagan celebration of Lupercalia. I hope I'm saying that correctly. The second claim is that it's to honor the anniversary of Saint Valentine's death or burial. Okay. Now, the first claim says it's done with a specific motive. The second claim says it's to honor, we talked about that. The third aspect which the author wants to communicate is that claim 1 is by one set of people, it's a few sort of experts, but claim 2 is the more prevalent belief. Now, at this point, I want to ask you, when you were evaluating the answer choices and when you read this, tell me the aspects of meanings that you could not identify that the sentence had to communicate. Which aspects could you not identify? And this is a multiple response question. You can choose more than one response. Which aspects of meaning could you not identify? Essentially, the 3 things that the sentence wants to communicate is the author wants to communicate that there are 2 claims about why February 14th is celebrated as Valentine's Day, the specifics of the claims, and then claim 1 is by one set of entities, claim 2 is by another set of entities, and you can see what those entities are. Okay, 3, 2, and 1. And this is feedback you should have. This is what we call as a strategic review process, which leads to you filling in your error log that truly helps you improve to that 90th percentile. Let me end the poll, broadcast the results, and you can see 79% of you did not identify aspect 3 of the meaning, which is this piece over here. And you will see how that has led to many of you choosing the incorrect option, which, by the way, had you identified this, you would have gotten to the correct answer. This is a 730, 740 level question. So it's in the difficult set of questions, it's among the more challenging ones or so. Okay. And you can really see those who did not do well with claims 1 and 2 also would have chosen incorrect options. The option that they would have chosen would have been different, and we'll see that as we do the option analysis. We already did this piece here, but the piece is if you're able to understand all the aspects and if you maintain that understanding while evaluating the answer choices, you say, congratulations, meaning is not the reason why I would have gotten this wrong. It probably would have been a sentence structure or a grammatical construction reason. But if you could not identify 1 or more aspects, focus, spend more time to extract the meaning. That's what's causing you to make a mistake, even before you worry about the grammar aspect of it. Okay, and that clarity needs to be there. Um, and how you get to that clarity, how do you get that 100% clarity in meaning, is if you pause this at strategic points, and this is what you learn in the master comprehension course. A lot of you think, hey, master comprehension is fairly basic. How do you read a sentence? I know this. No, you've got to learn how to read a sentence so that you don't miss aspects of meaning. Really important. And I can tell you, if I don't apply master comprehension while solving questions, there are questions where even I make mistakes. So it doesn't just apply to you. It applies to all of us who've been worrying about the GMAT for ages. Okay. So let's kind of talk about the errors in this sentence. As I said, I'm going to kind of go through it reasonably quickly because this is not an essay session, but this is just an illustration of how a 90th percentile student approaches this. What you see over here is there are these verbs in red. They don't have associated subjects because you have the subject verb pair perfect, the subject verb pair perfect, but there's no subject for is this verb is, or there's no subject for is claimed. And you say, okay, I have two missing subjects. That's something that's a problem. Choice A is wrong. Got to fix that. But other than that, the meaning's absolutely clear. Okay. So once we have the meaning and the error analysis, we're now going to go and analyze each answer choice. And when we analyze each answer choice, I'm going to keep my meaning with me because the intended meaning needs to be communicated by the correct answer choice. The correct answer choice will always maintain that meaning. Okay. This is choice B. Remember, this is your original choice, choice A. These are the three claims that we have over here so that you don't forget this. This is choice B. And let's look at choice B. While with an ulterior motive to Christianize the pagan celebration of Lupercalia, a few experts. So choice B is wrong. Why? Because this ulterior motive right now belongs to this group, few experts. That's not what the author wanted to communicate. Okay. As per the original option, choice A, church had this ulterior motive, not the few experts. And this one changes the meaning, even though it adds the subjects and verbs. This one is incorrect. You can see this is choice B over here. I know there's a lot of text here. The one on top always remains the same. This is choice B. And here we have why this choice is wrong. Why? Because it illogically suggests that the few experts present their claim, while with an ulterior motive, a few experts do claim. That ulterior motive right now belongs to a few experts, and the church's ulterior motive, the reason why the church coined this term, that is completely lost, which was there. So for these two reasons, which are one and the other the same, choice B is incorrect. Now, were you able to see this meaning distortion now that we're talking about this over here? Were you able to see this meaning distortion? How? And again, no grammar, just the meaning piece, and you should have rejected this for that. Okay, let's look at choice C. Choice C is what close to a majority of you chose. Let me bring the choices here. This is what how you guys as a class polled, and again, really good participation. Thank you for that. Okay, while a few experts claim that the church coined, this is choice C, by the way, the date February 14 as Valentine's Day, blah, 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 their more prevalent belief is, okay. Whose belief are we talking about here? In choice C, who does this word there refer to? The same set of experts, right? Is that what the author wanted to communicate? No. Not really. Beautifully written sentence, nothing grammatically wrong with it. Okay, but changes the meaning. Okay. Half the class chose this. Where did you make a mistake when you chose choice C? Understanding the meaning, right? No grammar piece. Beautifully written choice. Nothing grammatically wrong about it. It's just that the meaning that it communicates, it's not what the author wanted to communicate, and the meaning that it communicates, yeah. It's the meaning analysis, yes. Why did you rush? You had ample time. I mean, I gave you about 2 minutes and 15 seconds in this. Okay. So what will you learn from this? What's your takeaway from this? How will you avoid making such a mistake? Look for meaning. Focus on meaning. Read the sentence thoroughly. Don't confuse there and the. Absolutely. Break the sentence down. Good. Perfect. Let's look at choice D. D for delta. Let's go and clear this. Again, remember this takeaway. As you solve more questions, you're going to find your accuracy will improve right away. The church coined the date February 14 as Valentine's Day, as claimed by a few experts. I'm going to talk about just this one aspect over here. And just to really tell you a meaning change, this is something which is very prevalent in RC answer choices. This aspect is tested, sometimes it's tested in SC as well. So I'm going to talk about providing information while comparing that with actually making claims. Okay. So if you look at the sentence, Apple is the market leader is claimed by Forbes magazine. Now, are you communicating information? Yes. Are you yourself making a claim here? No, you're not making a claim here. You're just communicating information. Should you be blamed if it turns out that Apple is not the market leader? Should you be blamed? No. Really important piece here. You're communicating information, but you're not making a claim. All you're just telling is, hey, Apple is the market leader. This is something that's claimed by Forbes magazine. Okay. Now let's look at another sentence. What do you think are the answers here? Are you communicating information? Absolutely. Are you making a claim here? Yes. You can really say why, the way we did that, remember, with the first 10 questions. You can use the same format. Why, and why? If you're making a claim, why should you not be blamed? The answer to all three of these is yes. If you're making a claim, then you will be blamed. Okay, if you're not making a claim, then you can't be blamed. And that's a really important piece in essentially that you've got to understand on the GMAT. Okay, when in RC, how are you supporting the claim? You're behind it, so you're supporting the okay. You can say you're supporting the claim because Apple is the market leader. I agree with that as claimed by Forbes magazine, but you're putting your agreement in, so you're really saying, hey, I agree with the claim made by Forbes magazine. So you are also making the claim. Because remember, you're pushing your recommendation to your boss. Oh, Forbes is also making the claim here. Let me just really say this. Let's just take a very simple sentence. And this is something that, I don't know, some of you probably would have said. Okay, got it. Good. He who smelt it dealt it. Yes, but sometimes he who endorsed it also is dealt it. So let's just look at this. Let's look at this piece over here. If you tell your friend this, are you giving a recommendation? Yes. So are you making a claim when you're giving a recommendation? You're endorsing something. You're asking your friend to act on it, right? Let's take the same sentence. Are you giving a recommendation here in this one? No, you're not giving a recommendation in this one. Not at all. Okay, you're just communicating information and say, hey, my friend, this is what I know from Morningstar. You go make your own decision. Think about it. Really important. And this is something which you've tested. You've seen tested. Those of you who've solved RC passages in inference questions, that's exactly what they test, right? What is the author communicating versus what is the author claiming? Anyone has seen that tested in inference questions? What can be inferred from an RC passage? Only what the author claims, not what the author communicates. That's something that's a very common way of testing. And if you don't know that, write to us. We'll be happy to share the recording of an RC passage or our RC session. Okay. Choice D has the same thing. As claimed by few experts means that the author is endorsing that claim. Remember, our original meaning was claim 1 was made by a few experts. Claim 2 was the more prevalent belief. But the author did not endorse either claim 1 or claim 2. But when you really say as claimed by a few experts, and over here is this part, both of these things, by saying that the author is now endorsing both these claims, something which wasn't intended to begin with. Okay, which is why choice D is wrong. Okay, which gets us to the right answer, which is choice E, that the church coined is claimed. The author is not claiming, the church coined is claimed by a few experts, but the more prevalent belief is it is celebrated on this day. Okay, again, the author is not claiming, he's just communicating information here. Okay, both these, he adds the subjects to the missing verbs, doesn't make any additional claims. The claims are made by the right entities. Everything's good. This is the correct answer. Now, why do people reject this? People say, hey, this is a weird sentence that's starting with that. I don't want to look at this. How many of you were in that boat? You say, this starts with that. This is a weird sentence. I have choice C, much more elegant sentence structure. I'm going to choose choice C. Okay. The other piece where people reject this is they say there should be a that over here. The more prevalent belief is it is celebrated on this date. Okay. And then the third thing they really say is, hey, this sentence structure that the church coined is claimed as passive voice. That has to be incorrect because passive voice is always incorrect on the GMAT. None of these things is a rule. None of these things is given. Okay. Passive voice is used on the GMAT. Passive voice is a construct of English, as is being a construct of English. They're not wrong on the GMAT. As long as they're used properly, they're just as correct. Okay. You will see a lot of unfamiliar sentence structures on the GMAT. As long as they communicate the right meaning, as long as the meaning is crystal clear, there is no ambiguity, that's absolutely correct. I mean, think about it. What's the role of grammar? Why did we invent grammar in the first place? In any language, what's the job of grammar? To communicate the meaning correctly. Not to standardize communication. Let me just give you a very, very simple sentence. They is dancing. What's wrong with the subject verb error here? What's the problem? Why can't I say they is dancing? No, I know R should be there. Why do I need the agreement? Why do I need the subject verb agreement? It's not grammar. Grammar is the rule which embodies that you should have subject verb agreement. But really, if I said they is dancing, do you know, is there one person dancing or multiple people? So do you know would you be able to figure out if the correct option is he is dancing, or if the correct sentence should have been they are dancing? Right? If I wrote this piece over here, would you be able to figure out, is it one person? Did I make a mistake in the subject or did I make a mistake in the verb? No, you can't figure out. That's why you need subject-verb agreement, so that the meaning is correct. No one created grammar rules because someone really just said, hey, let's create grammar rules. The purpose of grammar is that meaning should be correct. That's why days dancing is wrong. But what happens is when we learn grammar, we forget, why the hell did we even invent grammar? And that's something no one embodies this better than GMAT sentence correction. Why? Because they understand. It understands we are not trying to make you grammarians. By the way, most grammarians fail on GMAT sentence correction because they go towards the elegance in sentence structure. No, GMAT SC is not about elegance. GMAT SC is about clear and pristine meaning. And you're going to see that in the next SC session. Okay. Why is choice A wrong? Again, because it has missing subjects for the verbs. These ones is claimed and is over here. Okay. And the other ones grammatically correct. It's hard to get the meaning correct in such a short time? No. How many decisions do you take while driving? Can you tell me? How many decisions do you take while driving? Yes, in a split second. How are you able to take those decisions in a split second? Most people take about 15 decisions while driving. Okay. Because your brain knows that there's automatic processing that happens in various neural parts of the brain, right? It automatically sees if there's a pedestrian coming. Stop signs register automatically, all right? If there's someone behind you who's accelerating and you automatically look up in the rear view mirror, those things happen automatically in the same way. I mean, and you learned how to drive over a course of certain number of days, right? The same way it has to be this. Yes, it seems a lot of work right now, but when you learn how to break a sentence down into sentence structures, and you would do this over 300 to 400 sentences during that learning phase, attribution of meaning will happen automatically. The ability to really figure out, okay, here are missing subjects would happen automatically. Okay. So yes, it seems hard because truly, if you want to achieve 90th percentile, it can't just be, you know, the rules. You have to be able to apply things logically, and this is what it tests. But this is not rocket science. This is 2 weeks worth of effort, or about 40 hours worth of effort. If, for most people, that is. Not a 15th percentile guy, but you know, most of you are around that 40th percentile in SC. And you'll see that happen. Okay. And the piece which I want to make sure is, were you able to observe, just in this one question, you had about 20 odd sentence structures. Just in this one question. And this analysis, is just so much to learn from this analysis. You had 2 claims. Each claim had a sentence structure. Now, if you go back, look at this, each claim had a sentence structure. You had connectors, you had contrast words. Let's go back here, right? You have stuff while with an ulterior motive to Christianize the pagan celebration, a few experts. So you have this modifying a few experts, which, by the way, is not there in the original sentence. Do you see it now? And these are examples. And this is where a 90th percentile has an attitude of learning, not just solving the question correctly. It's about, hey, what did I learn from this question? Did I reject the incorrect options for good reasons that I'd be able to use in other questions as well? Okay. So to get to that 90th percentile, you need that foundation. But to build that foundation, you need feedback. You need to use the right method, which is the meaning-based approach. And then even as you do this, there will be those questions where you'd make mistakes. You need that feedback so that you're able to improve and learn from every mistake. A lot of people ask, and I think some of you may have asked, hey, is someone going to look at when I'm learning, look at my progress and give me feedback? How many of you have ever approached the EGMAT team and asked this question? I'm sure some of you have, yes. See, there's a couple of people over here. When you're in this phase, right? The feedback has to be instantaneous when you're learning something, which is where humans don't provide feedback, which is where you've got to build technology and to provide feedback. And that's what we've done. At EGMAT, we've invested upwards of $10 million in building technology. And a lot of that has gone into evaluating your progress and giving feedback over there. How many of you have watched these videos here? This is a screenshot from our website. How many of you watched this video? These are two videos, concept level feedback and application level feedback. If you haven't, click on it, watch this video. This is the video that you've got to watch. It'll tell you how do you get that feedback. And the reason why this is really important is, when you go through a typical course that doesn't give you feedback, what happens is if you're at 30th percentile, if you do it really diligently, you might achieve 60th percentile, or you might achieve 40th percentile, or you might not improve as well. In some cases, your ability might go down. Why? Because while learning, most courses do not give you feedback. And a classical example is if you just have a set of videos that don't evaluate how well you are learning while watching a video, they don't tell you, hey, in the last 30 minutes, based on how I can evaluate you, I'm going to grade you a score of 80 or so. Those courses, when you go through it, yes, you learn something, at least you feel you learn something, but your ability doesn't improve a whole lot if you're not diligent at all. If you're super diligent, yes, it would. But if you're not diligent, your ability may not improve a whole lot. And then you won't know that. Why? Because you're continuously watching videos. At EGMAT, we ensure we give you feedback, which is where, if you've gone through any of the concept files in SC, you can't just click and start a file. You have to interact with a 30-minute file at least 20 times. Some people get annoyed. Why do you make me click next? How many of you really say that? Why do you make me click next when you're watching a verb.ing file? Has anyone said, okay, why can't I have a 30-minute video? Yes, it's a conscious decision. I can make you watch that entire file in a single go. You will A, go to sleep. B, you will not ask yourself, what did I learn in the last 2 minutes before you click next? But every time you click next, you have to make a judgment. And we want you to make that judgment because we want you to get to that 90th percentile. That's why you got to click next. That's why you have win file questions. Because you've got to evaluate yourself. If, by the way, you did not learn as much, or if you missed a point, you should click back. It takes a lot of effort to build the kind of content we do. In fact, if you look at any SC file, top right-hand corner, there's a navigation that's there. You can go to any part of the file because if you want to revise, you want to make sure you get there. Building all of that, that's engineered. It's not something that's done. But building all of that requires a ton more effort. And if you go through it, you will see that effort come to fruition. You will not be able to, it may be easier to watch something which just plays automatically, but you will definitely learn more with this. So if you want to achieve 90th percentile, this is how you would go about doing this. Okay, and which is what has led to such success. So how many feedback points? This is just on the SC course. You can see for us, these two phases are the most important because if we build the right foundation, then this one over here becomes smooth sailing. Okay, and I'm going to show you how that feedback plays out over here fairly quickly. There's a subject verb module as a part of the paid course. What you see here is every file is evaluated. This is the quiz course. So all of these files, even though this has a video icon over here, it has embedded questions in there. Okay. You get a score over here. This time is not the length of the file. This time is how much time you spent on it. Okay. which means if you went back and watched a certain portion of the file twice, we will capture that piece over here. Okay. Now this guy did poorly in SV application. 60% is not a great score, but he revised it. Why do we know this? Because we are capturing this time, 47 minutes. The length of this file is about 31 minutes or so. Because of which, because he inculcated those learnings, the next file he was able to get 100%. And that is confirmation that he's moving forward properly. Had he gotten a 60%, he would have had to go back and revise those portions. There's no point going forward with gaps in there. Why? Because if you build something on a shaky foundation, you're not going to excel. Okay. Similarly, verb sequencing, very, very similar set. You can see how comprehensive. This is just verbs in this. Modifiers, comparisons, parallelism, a lot more comprehensive. And you can see this is how a diligent student does, the amount of time that that this person does. Okay. Now, this is a classic case. This guy scored 64% in this quiz, but then what you can't see is he scored 100% in the next file over here. How did he do that? Because the file in which he scored 64%, he revised those questions. Why do we know this? Because he bookmarked those questions and we could see that he went back and revised those questions. Okay. Again, for him, it was this application, it was this feedback that helped him improve. With that, I've come to the end of this webinar. I want to thank you guys for being with me. Again, just a summary. I'll answer your question. I'll give you 15, 20 more minutes. I know I saw a lot of questions about the MBA. So let me just finish and summarize this and I'll answer those questions. And while I do that, if you could tell me what you've learned from this webinar, that would be excellent. But just again, I know most of you are aiming for that top score, but don't just do it for admissions, do it also for scholarships. Really important. When it comes to to acing the GMAT, make sure you focus on building ability. That's 80% of the battle. The other pieces are 20%. Without this 80%, that 20% has no value. Have a personalized study plan. Really important. Personalized study plans is really important. It forces you to focus your energy on the areas where you would get the right kind of score improvement. Okay. Make sure you understand the stages of learning in every subsection, each of the 5 subsections. Actually, quant is even divided into further number properties, word problems, geometry, algebra, and advanced topics. Make sure you start at the right stage of learning and take feedback seriously. Really, really important. Don't rush through things. Okay. And thank you for providing the answer to the previous question. All right, with that, this is where you have all the things over here. I shared a bunch of webinar details, so you can join the SC webinar link over here. In this case, if you want to go to Admits and Scholarships page, you can get to it over here. Okay, and some of you were asking for about a mock. You can access a mock over here. If you want to download the presentation, here is the presentation. There's a lot of stuff over here. And of course, the success stories. If you want to know Magdalena or Pratik's, how did their accounts look like, download the ESRs, that's something you can do. Okay. And guys, short answer part, please feedback on the webinar. What did you learn from it? I'd truly appreciate it if you can put this over here. Okay. Is a full-time MBA recommended while having a full-time job? You can't do a full-time MBA with a full-time job. You can't have 2 full-times in there. So is preparing for the GMAT recommended while having a full-time job? Absolutely. Okay, takeaways ability can be built. That's great. More takeaways, guys. Again. Presentation link, top left-hand corner, it says ss12022.pdf. It's the title says session files. Is it okay for the study plan? Do you need the ESR or can you give your last GMAT official mark? So Rishabh, if you have, so let me just say this. If you have a score of 600 or higher, then official mark will definitely tell us something. You can use some data from it, but the official mark will not give you your ability scores. If it gets you your ability scores, then yes. But otherwise, I'll ask, yeah. So just write to us and we can help you do that. Otherwise, we'll ask you to really take a Sigma X mock, which the link to that is over here in Sigma X mock. Where can you get the paid version of the course? Just go to our website, go to our buy page, and buy the link that you need. Abhi says, if you are of Indian origin and of a different nationality, if your current nationality is different, would you be considered Asian or native of a particular country? No. If you are in, let's take an example here. If you're an Indian, if you were born in India and you're now in Canada and you have a Canadian citizenship or even a Canadian green card, you will not be considered Indian. Why? Because your visa processing will be based on as if you're a Canadian green card holder. So you will not be considered. Very similar to if you were an Indian, you came here, you have a green card now. If you want to do an MBA, you will not be considered Indian. You're only considered Indian if you still need that H1 post your graduation. Is a personalized study plan only for EG-MAT students? Yes, it's for EG-MAT students. I mean, we do offer some people personalized study plan. It's just that our first goal is to support our students, and we've just been so swamped with supporting our students right now. There was a time last year when we used to really offer study plans for everyone, and again, this is something that we recognize this year. Just given the growth that we have had, we can't do that. So it's just, we would love to do it, but it becomes difficult. Can we get a discount coupon to buy subscription? Guys, don't do that. I mean, our courses are designed to be very affordable. You're studying for a $250 test. You're going to get 50 to 100 grand worth of scholarship. Don't look for a $20 discount. It's just waste your time, waste our time. If you want a discount, or I would say, tell me if you get a scholarship, you're going to give me 5% of that. And yes, we can give you a discount. But I mean, in general, I would rather answer questions where you say, okay, how can you help me get a 740 versus, hey, give me a $20 discount. No. If you sign up for a 2-month course and you want to extend it, what would be the price for extension? It's $79 a month. Will EG-MAT mocks be sufficient, or do we need to purchase other mocks as well? Anubhav, so when you think about the EG-MAT learning structure, you actually get through about 40 assessments. Now, I understand there are 5 full-length mocks, but you have cementing quizzes, ability quizzes. Most people don't go for, and you also, in addition to the EG-MAT mocks, you also have the free official mocks as well. And so I think for 90% of our students, that's plenty, because on the EG-MAT platform, you have as many questions as you would have in about 30 mocks or so. In addition to the mocks, by the way. Okay, let me just look at this. Let me look clear. Again, guys, questions in the Q&A pod. I'm not looking for questions in the short answer pod, which is towards the right, but at the bottom left-hand corner. Rishabh says, should you apply for in 2022 with 2.2 years of experience and maybe a 700 score, or should you drop the plan for this year and apply with a so Rishabh, I'm assuming you're an Indian origin. If you're applying in the US, I would to a school in the US, I would recommend a 730 or higher score. I would not recommend applying with a 700. Now, if you had a 730 this year, 2.2 years, and if you're applying to a school that's not in the top 20, I would still recommend that. You'd still get a scholarship. But yeah, otherwise 2023. So again, which means give the GMAT now, start applying in September, or even prior to that in the early action round. So yeah. Kunal says, a great question. Can you please elaborate on the refining step after mastering application? Is there something one needs to go to go to? Yes. So Kunal, what happens is, remember this, 80th percentile student answers most of the easy questions correct, 90+% of the medium questions correct. But then when it comes to the hard questions that test the nuances, you're going to still have, your accuracy will probably still be about 60%. And because there are certain nuances that you still need to worry about. That's where refining to perfection comes in. So if you go to our website, actually I can share a link. On our website, we talk about refining to perfection on the homepage, and so let me just get you a link to that. And we have what we call as a last mile push program, that where we help students refine to perfection. So let me see if I can give you a link to that. Let's see if this works. Yes, I think I have the link to it. Actually, I couldn't get the link. It's on our homepage, which under the section analytics that help you push your score from 780 to 680 to 750. That's the one that you would go. But yeah, that's essentially what it is. Can I be a part of LMP if you scored 650 on the EGMAT test? Improve that score to a 680 or higher, and yes. Or in other words, if you have a 650, pass cementing in a couple of subsections, and then yes, absolutely. Again, remember, LMP help pushes your score from that cementing to refining to perfection. Okay. What's the process like once a student gets enrolled into the EGMAT platform? Good question. So you buy the course, then we ask you to take a Sigma X mock. We actually have an entire onboarding process over here where you have you go through about a 3-hour long course called a Your GMAT Roadmap, which essentially tells you what I told you in this webinar, but in a lot more detail. So as a first step, you build your study plan. That study plan tells you in which subsection, how do you go about doing this? It gives you a sequence in which you have to learn. So it says maybe start with SC or maybe start with CR depending on your starting abilities. Then you start with the first subsection, start learning. As you learn, every activity gives you feedback. You finish that subsection, do cementing, do refinement, then move to the second subsection. And again, during this time, if you have any doubts, every activity on the EGMAT platform has its own dedicated place where you can post those doubts, and our experts respond to those doubts within 1 business day. If you have a strategy doubt, we have a 5-person strategy team. Each one of our strategy experts either has a score of 700 and or has delivered upwards of 4,700 plus scores. So you write to them, again, you get a response within a day. How do Americans B-School look at applications from European countries? Again, from European countries do not matter. I mean, that from doesn't matter. What matters is, are you let's say a German citizen, or are you an Indian in Germany? If you're an Indian in Germany, it doesn't matter whether you've been in Germany or whether you're applying from India. The only advantage that you would have is the international experience. But from an application standpoint, beyond that, so your profile would be better, but you'd still be considered Indian because if you're an Indian citizen. If you are a German citizen, of course, you'd be considered German, and you'd then look at you but a lot more favorably in that case. Again, they don't have that many Germans, so that's the reason. It's one of those things where if you're an Indian, you have to, and if you're an Indian with a tech background, you have to deal with more competition. Okay, let's look at this. Can you shed some light on 12 plus 3 years of education for students aiming for an MBA? Or are you saying if you have plus 3 years rather than plus 4 years of education? Nikhil, most schools don't care about it. It used to be a thing. Again, look for school by school, but most schools, I mean, if your undergrad or your bachelor's is 3 years, that should be fine. And if that's not fine, there are remedial stuff. That's not going to worry about it. For a person who hasn't started preparing for the GMAT, how long would it take? So again, let's say you need 130-point improvement. So the rule of thumb I really say is, for every 10 points of improvement, you need budget about 12 to 13 hours. And so if you need 120 points of improvement, you should budget about 150 hours. If you need 200 points of improvement, budget about 250 to 260 hours or so. Is it advisable to do the GMAT in the final year of undergrad? Absolutely, yes. A lot of people do it. I mean, in fact, a couple of our our GMAT strategy experts did that. That's how we hired them, because at GMAT we pay way more to our strategy experts than what typical uh, salaries that you get coming right out of college. They were our students. They did really well. We said, hey, would you want to do this? They went through an assessment, and that's how we hired them. So yes, a lot of people do that. What it does is it pushes you to focus just on or your career. It helps you build that profile. You and essentially you have a leg up. You don't have to worry about your GMAT because the score is still valid for 5 years. Okay, let's look at this. "11 years of experience looking for an executive course. Any chances of scholarship?" Um, executive MBAs do not offer scholarship. It's just if you, yeah, that's something that I would say. It's very, I mean, I haven't heard of a single case. Full-time MBAs, ton of scholarship money, not part-time, not executive. How do you become part of LMP? Show us diligence. Show us that you've done stages 1 and 2 really well, and accordingly you should have a 680 plus score. But I mean, most importantly, show us diligence and essentially you then become a part of LMP. Again, I want to tell you this, guys. LMP is a step in the journey. A lot of people think LMP causes success. No, your diligence causes success. LMP provides that guidance, which is just at the last minute, because that's where you need that personalized guidance. Everywhere else, technology gives you way better guidance than a human can. If you wish to get to a 730 plus score in an M7 school, when should you ideally prepare for the GMAT? Right now, because you would to schools such as Darden and Columbia, you'd be able to get into an early action round or so. How hard is it to get into a top 20? If you're above 35, how much does age matter? So, Abhi, you need to have a good reason to do an MBA. Now, I think you mentioned that you're from Europe. European candidates tend to be older. Um, Another thing that I would say is if you are from Europe, look at INSEAD, look at uh, IMD Switzerland. Those are really great schools. IMD Switzerland, I think the average age is 31, 32. But having said that, USB schools, if you provide a need to really say, this is the reason why at 37 years, I need to do an MBA, and this is how I'm going to get an ROI, return on investment from that MBA, they will take you. 2017, 2018, I visited UCLA Anderson. The oldest guy in their full-time MBA class was 47 years old. If you look at our blog, I think you'll see if you Google MBA over 30 and EGMAT, you'll see I think 3 or 4 candidates who we profiled, who were our students who got into top business schools. You can see how they approached that application as well. How do you go from a Q50 to a Q51? Okay. Understand the behavior. So Q50 means you already pretty much know in everything that you need to know. I mean, there's nothing that that you need to learn. Q50 means you're there at that pinnacle. But what it also means is that there are certain process skills which you have in difficult questions that you miss. Maybe you're not able to infer information in certain category of questions. Maybe you don't consider all cases in when it comes to absolute value questions or so on and so forth. So how do you go about doing that? First of all, define where you make mistakes. Map it to what we call as the process skills in quant, and then work on those process skills. If you do that, that's something that actually I did. And you should be able to get to go from a Q50 to a Q51. That's the way you'd go about doing that. Here is a link to quant process skills. Do you take six? It's not a Six Sigma mock, it's Sigma X. It stands for Simulated Insightful GMAT Experience. That's why Sigma X. Um, so, so as proof towards LMP, yeah, that would be a good proof, yes. Or your official GMATs also proof towards LMP, but yes. How often should you take a mock test in 2 months of exam preparation? You should take a mock test once you're done cementing with 5 out of the 7 subsections. That's when you can take a mock test. Okay, guys, with that, I want to thank everyone for joining me today. It was wonderful having you here. Um, and I'll, as I said, we have a very comprehensive free trial. Go take a look at it, and then if you like learning from the free trial, you would love the paid version of the course. And again, if you have any question, you can write to me at rajat@ejashima.com. You can also connect with me on my LinkedIn. I have upwards of 20,000 students who connected with me on my LinkedIn. That would be your channel to connect with students at top B schools as well. Um, yeah, just look out for Rajat Sadana or EG Matt and Rajat, and then you should be able to get there. Thank you and have a wonderful day.